Okay, thank you. So at this time, we'll have our interim executive director give her reports, and we'll move on from there. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jasmine Georges-Yola, Interim Executive Director of the Board of Correction. Thank you all for joining us at this new location. We did a lot of work to try and find a location that would allow for hybrid remote capabilities. So we're happy that we're here, and we're hope that it's a suitable location going forward.
Before the interim director proceeds, I'd like to acknowledge the board members that are present remotely and in person. We have Dr. Bedard, and we have Ms. Sherman. We have remote Mr. Cohen, Dr. Cohen, Felipe, and then we have Jacqueline Pitts. So we have 6 board members present for today.
Okay, so I'm going to start with a note about our website. We've added a link to a page that describes the board's different committees. The board currently has 3 committees: the Committee on Deaths, Near Deaths, and Serious Injuries, a Committee on Women in the City's Jails, and the Committee on Programs and Education. And the link to the committee page can be found under the About tab on the board members page. The page includes a brief summary of each committee's mission, membership, and committee chair. And I'll next give an update on the deaths in custody since the board's June meeting. Felix Tavares, age 40, died on July 4th, 2023. Mr. Tavares died of a suspected, but as of yet unconfirmed overdose after being transported from AMKC to Elmhurst Hospital. Ricky Howell, age 60, died on July 6, 2023. Since he entered DOC custody on September 3rd, 2022, Mr. Howell was placed in the North Infirmary Command and Bellevue Hospital Prison Ward, where he remained from February 9th, 2023 through July 6, 2023. His cause of death has not yet been determined. William Johnstone, age 47, died on July 15th, 2023. Mr. Johnstone died in Mount Sinai Queens Hospital after being unresponsive in his cell in GRVC. His cause of death is currently undetermined. We express our condolences to Mr. Tavares's, Mr. Howell's, and Mr. Johnstone's families and loved ones. The board is actively investigating these deaths and will issue a final report on our findings. Next, the board expresses condolences for deaths of department staff since our meeting in June. They are Active Officer Franklin Brown, Retired Officer Sharon Francis, Retired Officer Jesus Elias Quinones, Retired Officer Nydia Oliver, Retired Officer John Whitley, Retired Officer Walter Simmons, Retired Captain John Dwyer, and Retired Officer Leonard Battaglia. And we want to share our deepest condolences with the families of these deceased officers and captains. And I'll next give the census update. As of July 17, 2023, the total census of people in custody is 6,216. And for comparison, in April, the census was 5,942. In May, it was 6,018. And in June, it was 6,085. And then broken down by facility as of 7/17, AMKC had 1,713, Bellevue 56, EMTC 1,174, GRVC 684, NIC and NIC Infirmary combined 274, RESH 135, RMSC 376, RNDC 993, BCBC 743, and West Facility 68. And finally, I have an update regarding our reporting and monitoring. BOC's environmental safety team has commenced monitoring the department's heat mitigation protocols and policies to ensure adequate and safe conditions during the summer months for staff and people in custody. BOC will be issuing a report on its findings in the coming months. BOC is also continuing to investigate the fire that occurred in the North Infirmary Command on April 6, 2023. We're awaiting DOC's full findings and the findings of the FDNY before issuing any report.
Thank you. My brief remarks is regarding the importance of succession planning and giving opportunity to younger generations to learn about the business of correction and correctional oversight. I'm proud to say that the Board of Correction has brought on, I think it's 10 interns this for the summer. We have two of them with us here today. Mr. Jonah from SUNY Binghamton, and I think it's political science he's studying. And Jonah, attending NYU. Jonah is a senior, and Jonah's sophomore, and Isabella, senior, from NYU. So thank you, and good luck in your internships. I'd like to say good morning to the commissioner. Just one brief question of privilege. The interim executive director did indicate some numbers on April 23, 5,942, and May 6,018, and as of June 6,085 PICs in custody. Do you have a 2024 forecast based on, it seems like there's a escalation, and I'd just like to know what your team is forecasting.
Yeah, good afternoon, Chairman, and thanks you for the question. And we've been public about this. We built out an Office of Management Analysis and Planning team, and we've been actively doing population forecasting so that we can manage properly the city's jail capacity for those that are placed in our custody. And I've repeatedly stated that if there's no change in the adjudication of justice administration for those that are charged with crimes, we anticipate a forecast of the detainee population by July of 2024 to be at 7,000.
Hi, Commissioner. Can you just share any insights you have about, is that about inflow? Is it about delayed outflow? What's causing those numbers to escalate so rapidly?
The court process is what's causing it. So the outflow of persons that are in temporary detention is not happening at a pace that's exceeding the inflow of bodies coming in. It is a flow-through problem. So we have, I think I've stated, we have, I think, almost, if not just over 500 people in custody that have been in our custody for over 2 years. Actually, the number is 484, so almost 500 people that have been in our custody for almost 2 years. And we have 757 individuals that have been in our custody anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So as individuals continue to come into the system and they're not exiting it in a timely manner, and this has been an issue that dates back, as you know, probably like a decade. New York City has always had a more than abnormal length of stay issue that got exacerbated by COVID. We have seen some relief of that since COVID has somewhat abated, but it is still 3 times higher than the national average.
Hi.
Okay. Hopefully I can be heard with or without the microphone. Could you speak a little bit
about plans that the DOC has, that the city has to work on that. Efforts that are currently happening to partner with our partners in government in the courts to improve upon that record and to facilitate the reduction in lengths of stay.
So the power of the city itself, specifically my department, the Department of Corrections, has very little influence on that process. This is in the sole responsibility between the coordination between the district attorneys as they prosecute these cases, and obviously the judges, the state courts, the Supreme Courts that are overseeing these trial cases that are coming to court. So we do work with MOCJ, the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. We do provide them long stayer lists of individuals that have been in our custody for far too long. We know that the longer an individual is in custody, the higher probability that they are either going to be a victim or they're going to be a predator or an act of violence. So it's important that these not only detainees get their rights and go through the speedy trial process, but again, this is in the hand of the state courts. Every time I engage with our state legislatures, I make this a point that they need to provide whatever level of funding or relief that the state courts need in order to increase their bandwidth to be able to properly manage the judicial process of these cases.
Well, just one more last point, which is I know that there had been compounding this, a delay in getting folks who were going to go upstate transferred upstate. Has that delay been ameliorated?
Yeah, so the state docs, Department of Corrections and Community Supervision, has lightened its process that related to COVID, which was stalling the process a bit. But we have a great partnership with state docs, and people are flowing, those that are sentenced to state time, at a faster pace than they did at sort of the beginning of January 2022.
Thank you. Is there anyone else before we?
I have a quick question for the Commissioner Molina. I'm sorry to hear that you're dealing with this increased length of stay. I know well the amount of anxiety that it creates in people in custody and the likelihood of increasing incidents. What else can you do in terms of providing more predictability to those in custody who actually are spending these long times in Rikers without even having a clear sense of a line of vision on when they will be coming out?
I'm sorry, clear predictability was the question?
Any ability that you have to ensure that those who are with you for a long time, and you mentioned that some folks are there more than a year, that's incredible and awful, waiting for their case to be resolved. What other efforts do you think can be put in place to help those people have a better sense of predictability, reduce their anxiety, and actually feel more of agency within the process?
That's a good question. We do, unfortunately, the significant majority of those that are in our custody are charged with very violent crimes. So there's a high probability that many of these individuals are going to be going upstate. We do a lot to engage with these individuals so that we can sort of help them understand what might be waiting for them upstate, so they can understand what type of tools might be available for them to maintain contact with their loved ones and to make sure that they don't cease engaging with the outside community of their loved one and family, because that is going to be the support system that allows them to survive this. But when I think of a continuum of care for people that are in custody, there are two groups. There are those that are going to leave our local system. And we've had great success in our program 6A powers. We've released, I believe the number is like 62 people. And we've shown that when individuals have been released early through program 6A and they are supported, we have seen a 90% success rate, at least in them not recidivating in a way that would have them come back to be reincarcerated in any way. But there needs to be a continuum of care strategy with the state because of our long lengths of stay, we do a lot of investment, and shout out to our Department of Programs and Community Engagement Division with these individuals, whether it's getting them to understand the value of either getting their GED. As you know, recently, we've just been able to do the electronic GED so people get their scores faster. Traditional high school diplomas, we've recently had a graduation of those that graduated from high school. We have many, many people in custody, both men and women, that are participating in the Manhattan College program. And there is a lot of investment that's made by the city for those that are in custody. And we see, especially our young people, blossom when they're engaged in this way. This level of engagement has allowed, at least fiscal year to date, for RNDC, the Robert M. Daverin Center, to see our violence reduction in slashing and stabbings there nearly 60% for fiscal year 23 compared to fiscal year 22. But if these individuals are going to have to be reset at zero because they're sent to a state facility that may not have access to the same level of education programming, vocational programming, then I think it's unfortunately a lot of wasted effort. So, you know, anything that we can do, and we're happy to do it, to share with our state partners the sort of investment that has been made in an individual, that can sort of help identify the proper placement of a person to continue down that pathway, even if they're doing significant amount of time in the state system. We think that can actually change the culture within the state prison system, because then you would have ambassadors at a significant scale, especially for young people, to say, listen, you don't have to be defined by your worst mistake. There is life after incarceration. And I think that investment from an educational level, and we're talking about vocational training level, it gives that individual actually a number of topics of conversation that are worthy, so that their loved ones that are supporting them can be proud of the changes that they're making towards their rehabilitation, despite them being in an incarcerated state within our state prison system.
Thank you.
Yes, go ahead, Dr. Cohen. And while Dr. Cohen is trying to get connected, and since this is not a formal meeting, the agenda does have correctional health services first, but since
Okay.
you are speaking now, Commissioner, if you
Yeah.
would like to go into line of questioning with you, that the board might have
Okay,
for continuity's sake.
you got it.
Okay.
It's Dr. Cohen. We wait with bated breath.
Cohen. I think Dr. Cohen is in a very remote location and he might have communications problems.
Well, just to put a point on, obviously this is a venue to talk about how we can improve the quality of services and for those that are justice involved. But we can't forget the victims of crimes either. They also need justice. And if we just look at those that are charged and accused allegedly of murder, there are 984 victims of those allegations that have not received justice. So this delay within our court system doesn't benefit the accused, and it doesn't benefit the nearly 1,000 murder victims of this city that are waiting for justice for their loved ones. So the court system needs to move faster in its processes for adjudication.
Well, I'll state that, regarding the Board of Correction to do a review or to see how we can impact that process, we'll start that discussions internally.
Mhm.
And so that we can lend our support to make sure that the system is balanced across.
Absolutely. Thank you for that.
Thank you. So Dr. Cohen is back.
Yes.
Let's see if,
Commissioner, nice to see you.
Nice to
Um,
see you too.
You just mentioned RNDC, the successes that you've had in RNDC. Quite a while ago, and every 5 days, you continue a a series of overrides of board rules, one of which includes mixing of young populations and older populations. Could you explain to the board why you think that as you say, every 5 days, that an emergency situation exists in the jails that requires overriding multiple standards of the Board of Correction? It's been years almost that you've been doing this, and you describe a system which is, you described a system which is nirvanish just now in terms of the support given to people about to go extinct. Why do you declare an emergency every 5 days and override board standards?
So those EEOs are largely connected to make sure that there's no impeding our ability to implement the action plan, which we negotiated with the federal monitor, making sure that we can sort of move very quickly in order to address issues. And I think we've seen that be done pretty successfully over the last 19 months to address those issues. And those executive orders give us the level of just agility that we need to respond to the decades of mismanagement of our jail system.
Could you please let us know which of the things that you are overriding give you the facility to meet the action plan? From what I've read of the recent reports, you have not done as well as you're stating right now. But what specific parts of our rules don't allow you to function effectively?
So we can respond to you that more formally than in a casual conversation in this public setting.
This is not a casual conversation, Commissioner.
It is because you're in your car and I'm here in this room.
Yeah. Okay, so we are going to move forward at this time. Dr. Cohen, Commissioner. So right now, we would like to go into Department of Correction Commissioner updates, if you may, Commissioner.
Sure. So I have a brief update here, just because there's been a lot of talk of what's been going on within the DOC. And I think individuals don't realize really the remarkable work that has been done over the last 19 months being the apex of the crisis that this administration inherited. This administration inherited a collapsing jail system driven by what I would describe as 4 major issues. A staffing crisis driven largely by significant absenteeism. Escalating violence, particularly slashings and stabbings. No accountability. Over 2,000 allegations of misconduct were not acted upon because the statute of limitations had expired under the prior administration and prior investigation division leadership, but nobody hollered about it. Another 3,700 disciplinary cases had not been addressed, going back to misconduct that went back to 2017. This level of disciplinary inaction built a muscle memory of poor practices for thousands of uniformed staff. And lastly, rising use of force incidents every year from 2016 to 2021, despite the detainee population from 2016 to 2021, in all of those years decreasing, the number of use of force incidents rose. From 2016, we were at just over 4,000 incidences of force. And by the time we finished 2021, the number was over 8,000. The department's leadership team began taking action out of the gate to address the above and other issues of disorder and mismanagement. And the metrics that I'm sharing with you this afternoon is where the department is as of about Sunday, July 16th, 2023. Staff absenteeism, to give you a glimpse, in January of 2022, the highest number of daily people that called out sick was 604. The average of people that called out sick a day was 242. And the lowest day of staff called out on any given day in January of 2022 was 154. June of 2023, the highest number of daily call-outs was 113, an 81% decrease from the highest number. Our average per day was 72, a decrease of 70% from what was the average in January of 2022. And our lowest day, and I had to check this multiple times, was 40, a 74% decrease from the lowest day number of January 2022. Slashings and stabbings. Fiscal year 2023 versus fiscal year 2022, which was just ended a few weeks ago, we had a decrease of 21.5% in slashings and stabbings. In calendar year to date, department-wide, that decrease is 36%. Staff discipline to date, I have signed off on the adjudication of over 3,000 disciplinary cases, which unfortunately included the termination, forced resignation, or forced retirement of over 300 staff. That, I believe, is more discipline than my last 5 predecessors combined and the last 3 mayors combined. And that's probably more discipline adjudicated and overseen by any commissioner in New York City's history in any agency. Use of force in calendar year 2022 versus calendar year 2021, despite a rising detainee population, the department experienced a decrease of use of force incidences in 2022 versus 21 of 14%. This has never happened in the preceding years, never. Fiscal year 23 to 22 comparison is flat, but we did manage a decrease of 1.1%, and calendar year to date, that decrease is 2.3% as of Sunday. Other important statistics I'll share with you is fiscal year 23 assaults on staff without serious injury decreased 38.9%. Calendar year to date, that decrease is about 23.3%. Serious injuries to detainees this year are down 24%. We are housing individuals through our intake process improvements 99.5% of the time within 24 hours. Our production, all court production, has improved citywide till about 91%. In June 2023, we actually managed a 98% success rate of producing individuals to court. And when I checked the thing this morning for the month, and our average is at 98% month to date. The department, under our Deputy Commissioner of Training and Development, Dr. Robert Gonzalez, who I believe you met at your last meeting, developed a field training program of 8 weeks long for new graduates. Our new academy class had 85 graduates, and it is the first time in history, I believe, where we have not lost one recruit after graduation, because our new field training officer program is supporting our staff to make sure that they acclimate well to the environment of their responsibility as correction officers. And that last class was also the first class to use the NYPD state-of-the-art training center, so that we're training our officers in the best training facility, not only in the city, but I think in the country, to train law enforcement officers, the NYPD's Academy in Queens. Sanitation and beautification also have significantly improved for those that have visited on the island compared to what it was in December of 2021. We have detainees back at work and engaged in a lot of this beautification work in our facilities, and that has been marked with significant improvement. And that's the update I have.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. I'll ask any of the board members might have any questions to the Commissioner.
Our agenda, and I believe it was our public agenda, did list 6 items for Department of Correction updates. And I know that board members do have questions on each of them, so I would suggest that maybe we go through them in order based on the agenda.
You can certainly take that in the form of a question to the commissioner in the order you so seek.
Given that the first item on that list is the $17 million in recent cuts to programming in the jails, as I did at the last meeting, I'm going to recuse myself because I'm a board member of the Osborne Association. Come get me.
Thank you, Dr. Bedard.
So Commissioner, I know that you're joined today by DC Torres, and I don't know whether the department wanted to present something in advance of questions. It might work to provide that. I think I might ask questions that would be answered in the first instance. So I think that the department had a presentation planned.
Sure. So I think before I turn over the floor to DC Torres and her team, if you would just allow me a few moments to open. As it relates to the $17 million in cuts to the programming budget, to comply with the mandated 4% city tax levy budget reduction, or what's also known as the PEG, the program to eliminate the gap, the department had to review all aspects of its budget, both personal services and other than personal services, to develop a savings proposal totaling $47 million. As for the benefit of those that are listening, personal services include salaries, wages, and fringe benefits of city employees. Other than personal services, also known as OTPS, includes expenses other than salaries and fringe benefits, such as supplies, equipment, utilities, and contractual services. These savings cannot be sustained by our personal services budget alone, as we have already received significant budgetary and headcount reductions to both civilian non-uniform and uniform staffing. When analyzing our OTPS budget, the most significant funding resides within programs, facilities maintenance, nutritional services, commissary, and person in custody wages. After careful review, we determined that the divisions of programs would have to provide the services currently afforded by some contracted providers in response to the proposed reductions by reassigning selected staff, increasing the delivery of service in congregated areas, leveraging technology, and expanding partnerships with volunteer and faith-based groups. The programs team here today will explain in greater detail how we've planned to insource these offerings and ensure programs are still provided adequately to the population. As a reminder, mental health, substance abuse, and reentry services are not impacted by this cut. And I just remind that we initially were going to have to cut $21.1 million from the Division of Programs, which would have eliminated the Workforce Development Unit. And DC Torres and her team worked diligently with our budget and finance team to see how we could avoid making this cut at that level. And after the personal services reduction, we were able to get the remaining reduction amount down from $21.1 million to $17.1 million, which enabled us to keep our critical workforce development courses such as OSHA, flagging, barista, and many other programs to continue to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to DC Torres and her team.
While DC Torres is preparing with her team, just for those who might have recently arrived or those who are on YouTube, this meeting does not have a quorum. It's for information purposes only at this time. And I just wanted that to be known for the record.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. The Division of Programs and Community Partnerships would like to thank the Board of Correction for your patience, as we fully understood from the last board the interest in us responding to all the many questions that you had regarding the insourcing that we've had to do as a result of the 4% reduction. We come prepared this afternoon to actually give you a presentation that we hope would actually respond to all the many questions. I begin by introducing those members from our division who have joined me today. To my left is Associate Commissioner Phil Torrio from our division and Assistant Commissioner Nell McCarty. You may ask the reason I brought these members. When it comes to our division, the division is not Francis Torres, but is in fact a division comprised of 243 members. Those 243 members are broken down by having 208 boldest non-uniform members and 35 uniform members assigned in the role of divisional officers. This number excludes 72 uniform members who are assigned inside the facilities to provide what we call facility programs as redefined under the leadership of the commissioner. When we speak about insourcing, we do understand that there has been a confusion, and we hope to actually take care of that. When we speak about a specific group of staff members from our division who are stepping in to cover the footprint of our formerly contracted providers, we are talking about a specific group within our counseling unit. They are known as associate correctional counselors. But I also think that it would be important for us to establish for you today what it is that our division has been doing all along, aside and in conjunction with those former contracted providers. So if we go to the next slide of the presentation, our presentation today consists of 4 parts: to provide the board and the public with the scope of services by contracted providers compared to other programs areas that are sponsored and afforded by our division. Part 2 is to transition of groups to our counseling services, which we hope will respond to all the many questions. Part 3 is to highlight for the board and the public what are the unchanged services that will continue to take place and have continued to take place. And part 4 is more to give you a highlight on some of the initiatives that we always have. Keep in mind that our division is always in motion, is always in evolution. The numbers of the staff members that I just gave to you vary from day to day. They're impacted by people who actually go to other city agencies, by people who look shifting other career opportunities and so forth, as well as by those members from the external or the internal who are interested and are hired to become members of our division. With that said, we'll move to next slide, which will be covered by Associate Commissioner Phil Torrio.
Board members, good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. As you can see on this slide, the pie chart, it seeks to speak to the perception, if you will, that however unfortunate the targeted approach to jail-based services was the sole set of programming that we afforded. As I mentioned, however unfortunate, what this pie chart does illustrate is that indeed there still is and continues to be a variety of other services that are available to the incarcerated individuals. The footprint of our counseling unit is unchanged. Individuals continue to have access to recreation, to the law libraries, to chaplaincy services, to a host of other kinds of programming, from workforce development to the K-9 program. The footprint of the Department of Education is unchanged. And very importantly, re-entry services also continue at the previous level. So while indeed the targeted approach to jail-based services has been insourced, incarcerated individuals continue to have access to a wide array of services, and we'll speak more to the insourcing process later on in this presentation. Next slide, please. So actually on the previous slide, the green sections comprised the DOC staff. So who are we? It's worth mentioning that the DOC team, the programs team, consists of seasoned staff members with an average of 7 years with the department and 10 years in the social service field. So in addition to their, what I would say is sound, jail-based, on-the-ground experience, they also have the requisite educational credentials to be successful. It's worth noting that 77% of individuals have an advanced degree. So yes, programs are being insourced, but they're being insourced and taken on by individuals who have relevant experience as well as educational credentials.
Can I just make sure that I understand the numbers? So I see 190 staff members responded
Sure.
to a questionnaire, I assume. That's 190 out of the total 243? Is that correct? Did I get those numbers right?
You did,
Okay.
keeping in mind that that 43,
Flux.
exactly.
Varies. Got it.
And I'll pass it to my colleague, Nell McCarty, for the next slides.
I have a question.
Please.
It's good, Dr. Cohen, but I'd like this to be for the board members to hold their questions until the presentation is complete. But go ahead at this time, Dr. Cohen. Okay, Dr. Cohen maybe he has communication problems again, so if you can continue.
Okay, so if we can pull up the next slide. Thank you. So what I want to go over is just a little bit about our training and our experience, going a little bit more in depth about who our staff are that work for the Division of Programs. As you can see on this slide, since 2015 to present, and based on our current assigned roles, our Division of Programs staff have demonstrated competency in their professional careers and have participated in ongoing learning experiences. I'm going to outline a snapshot of the experiences and trainings of the members of our Division of Programs team through these next bullets. First, I would like to highlight that our team is trained on evidence-based practices, specifically evidence-based curriculums and best practices in the criminal justice sector, and we continue to participate in ongoing trainings and development. For example, within the last month, our associate correctional counselors have participated in 3 trainings. One of them is a 2-part motivational interview training led by the Center for Urban and Community Services, or CUCS. They also participated in a refresher training for SAMHSA's anger management curriculum, which is our identified anger management curriculum per our program menu that we've been affording with our contracted providers previously. We also participated in a refresher training on the Change Company's interactive journal series. The department uses multiple interactive journal series through the Change Company, but the one that we specifically trained on was Courage to Change series, which is an 8-book series that targets the big 8 criminogenic need areas. For the month of July, we were specifically focusing on the social values booklet and then moving into responsible thinking as we enter into August of 2023. During the month of August, we will be conducting a training on 3 additional curriculums. One of them being a reentry curriculum titled Merging Two Worlds. One of them being a work readiness curriculum, Ready, Set, Work. And the other one being Thinking for a Change, or T4C, as it's also known, which is a National Institute of Corrections, CBT-rooted curriculum. So it's rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy skill building with the goal to help people connect that their thoughts and their feelings influence their actions. Our program counselors, and I would just like to highlight this as well, have been a primary staff who've led group facilitation within certain housing areas since 2015. Those areas include units like our adolescent and emergent adult units, also our secure unit, and our enhanced supervision housing unit. In 2022, we expanded the program counselor footprint beyond just the emerging adult ESH units, but into the adult ESH units as well. At the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic in March of 2020, it was the first time in history that our internal non-uniform program staff were deemed essential and remained on site throughout the entirety of the pandemic. Further, as I keep moving forward, we have, and historically and presently, our non-uniform department staff assigned to the Division of Programs have been the point people for providers and volunteers to navigate the jails, be introduced to housing units, and other members of the team, other people within the jail, like wardens or deputy wardens or officers. And lastly, our non-uniform staff assigned to the Division of Programs continue to lead community engagement days. We conduct family interventions. We respond to emergencies within the jail to assist in de-escalating our problem solving on programs-related items with people in custody. So that's just, again, to highlight, since 2015 through the present, the experience and the training that our staff hold. If we can move to the next slide. Nervous. I don't know why. Okay, I want to talk a little bit more about what actions have been taken to prepare for insourcing. First and foremost, we would like to outline our proactive communication strategy with the District Council 37, Local 371, which is the largest social service union in the city. Our division and our department aims to have a partnership and working relationship with all the unions that our staff are assigned. So over the course of the last 2 months, we've had to hold conversations regarding the Associate Correctional Counselor's task and standards and the subsequent changes that these task and standards needed to undergo to achieve the return to providing group-based counseling. We held general meetings with our Associate Correctional Counseling team where we transparently went over the changes and the updates to their task and standards and the expectations set forth. As mentioned on the last slide, we provided refresher trainings on facilitation techniques, evidence-based practices, and new curricula. We developed a 6-month-long curriculum calendar with the goal to go through 7 different curricula from our program menu over the course of 6 months, giving people the opportunity to gain 20 certificates of completion and achievement through completing these programs. We drafted and put into effect a counseling coverage schedule based on our current staffing levels to make sure that we were actually providing an accurate footprint across the various housing units. We onboarded 5 counseling supervisors who are going to support with the provision of social services within our jails. And we aligned with providers on the schedule for transitional coordinators, so that group that said transition or reentry planning through MOCJ, making sure that those team members, that we knew what days they were coming in, what their schedule was, so that we could continue to have transition and reentry support as people go either back to the community or upstate. We notified people in custody of the transition to group facilitation and one-on-one by from providers to DOC counseling members, and then we commenced in uploading forms and flyers to our tablets for the accessibility for people in custody to know about these changes that have occurred. I think we can go to the next slide. So let me talk to you a little bit more about the Counseling Services Unit. So I've been a member of the Counseling Services Unit for about the last 8 years. I started off as an associate correctional counselor, and right now we have a team of about 86 counseling professionals who provide people in custody with access to services and meaningful evidence-based programming. As you can see by this chart, our unit is much more than just correctional counselors or associate correctional counselors. We are a team of 5 distinct roles. Those are correctional counselors, program counselors, we have a reentry, associate correctional counselor, intervention specialists, and social workers. The associate correctional counselors, level 1 and 2, on this chart, you can see they're titled correctional counselors, provide access to social services, referral assistance, and now group, and also individual counseling. Program counselors' primary focus is to provide group-based programming, behavior modification programming, and through the use of individual support plans and targeted individual counseling for emerging adults and those in ESH. The reentry-focused associate correctional counselor, level 2, helps conduct and schedule program-related new admission orientations at EMTC and the Rose M. Singer Center. This team member also serves as a liaison when it comes to release planning. Intervention specialists facilitate family interventions, conduct behavioral interventions, and assist with the de-escalation or incident-related support. Social workers provide access to additional counseling services, maintain a caseload of approximately 20 people who they provide more enhanced support to, and they may also provide group-based programming to special populations. Now, if I go a little bit further, I just want to provide clarity as much as possible regarding who's doing the groups that were done by the providers. So just to highlight from this chart, from what I just mentioned, the associate correctional counselors level 1, the program counselors, and then social workers for specific special populations are the team members who are providing the group-based programming previously conducted by the contracted providers. I would also like to provide some feedback or clarity on what shifted under this new model, because obviously something had to give in order for us to focus on doing group. So prior to this shift, in the task and standards for the associate correctional counselors, these team members provided most services in a one-on-one format. So one-on-one is the service or programming that is required to shift as we transition our focus back to group-based programming. I mentioned back because the associate correctional counselor team from 2015 through 2019 had been providing group-based services previously. But for a few reasons, I don't want this shift to be considered a loss of services. First, the associate correctional counselors will provide people in custody with the same frequency of programming, just now in a group format. So similar to how any of us in this room may sometimes choose to go to a support group or group therapy over one-on-one counseling or individual support outreach, now we will be offering these services in a group setting. We're not changing, but rather broadening to incorporate the universality of the group experience. Second, some of our experience when we have one-on-one counseling with individuals is that they're just seeking to connect, socialize, or sometimes even vent outside of maybe the people that they live with on the housing unit. This will continue, if not by our counselor during a 15-minute before and after group. It may continue with the chaplaincy services unit who affords religious-based counseling, or by the recreation team who lends a listening ear when doing recreational focused activities on the unit. And then lastly, I'd also like to highlight CHS, who's sitting next to me, that they remain our partner and the only provider of mental health counseling or therapy. So for things beyond the scope of the Division of Programs, referrals will be made to CHS so that they can provide ongoing one-on-one support through mental health therapy. So as we go through the PowerPoint, and I'll stop being red and nervous, we will move forward and talk about a few things that are unchanged within the Division of Programs. So some of the different areas that we already identified in the pie chart, and I'm going to pass it over to Phil Terweel.
Thank you, Nell. So many of the services I'm about to go over briefly are familiar to you, but nevertheless, I think it's an important reminder of what continues to be. Our recreation team, 16 members strong, continues to afford recreational services on the units 1 to 2 times a week. You have seen it in action. The contrast is stark between individuals maybe sitting on their bed, watching TV, and when these individuals come to the unit, you see the engagement, you see people liven up and shifting their attention from whatever they were doing previously. Commissioner mentioned, of course, and you know that most individuals are pre-trial, so law libraries is a critical service. That service is also unchanged. We have 24 legal coordinators who afford services in all the facilities. And with our tablet program, everyone has access to LexisNexis, the research application, on their tablets as well. When I say everyone, I mean everyone with a tablet, and I'm going to speak more about that in a little bit. Next slide, please. Our chaplaincy services was returned, if you will, to the Division of Programs in January of this year, and we have shifted their presence back into the facilities where they were previously not based, so that there's closer connection between these individuals, the chaplains, and the incarcerated population. Needless to say, in a trying time, people either come to rely more on their faith or turn to their faith. Presently, we have resumed congregate services in all facilities, and also we're making sure that the chaplains make daily rounds. There's a strong correlation between educational services and readmissions. Pleased to say that at 4 facilities, educational services continue to be afforded by the DOE, and excited to share that at AMKC, we have launched for the first time in some time an education house where individuals who express an interest in educational services are all living together, and instructors from the DOE actually come to the housing unit to afford the services, which of course is a big plus because it eliminates the escort need, which can create bottlenecks and delays and at times cancellations. So we're trying to take an innovative approach to making sure that more individuals have access to educational services. Next slide, please. Workforce development continues to be incredibly popular among the individuals. It's why the commissioner made this strong case that these specific services not be reduced. In selecting the services that we afford, we looked at what are the individuals interested in. Where is their demand for, in terms of employment, and where in the community can individuals continue to progress free of charge? And that's how we came to select specific courses and programs that we afford in all facilities and are now tying to the counseling services so that if individuals are actively engaged in modules like anger management, interpersonal relations, they become eligible for these workforce development courses, thereby hopefully creating a win-win situation. Someone is better prepared from perhaps an emotional standpoint, and also better prepared in the sense of being ready for obtaining and maintaining employment. Fine and performing arts, akin to the recreation unit, delivers a service that's widely popular among incarcerated individuals. They go from unit to unit. Earlier this week, I was in ESH, level 2, where I saw the individuals congregate around the facilitator, just being actively engaged, and what a shift that was from just sitting idly by. That service continues as before. Next slide, please. Also widely popular, transition planning, again, we reiterated before, but that service continues. Reentry services continue to be available to the incarcerated individuals via the MOCJ contracted providers, which is a team currently of 40 staff. In addition, the counselors are familiar with the services afforded. Of course, we've worked hand in hand for many years. So that is another avenue if someone wishes to engage or better understand what services may be available. Yes, they can go to the transition coordinators. They can also go to our staff because we're also well-versed in what these organizations afford. We have numerous enrichment programs that really speak to specific interests of individuals. This too, we're utilizing as an incentive opportunity for people to engage in vital counseling services. When you think of enrichment programs, think of a music program, a music production program, think of physical exercise, think of storytelling, different kinds of programs that really speak to the interest of those in our custody. Next slide, please. You're familiar, I'm sure, with the Children's Museum of Manhattan. Another innovative step we've taken post-pandemic is that we have afforded it not only to the women in our custody, but also to the men. We have had more than 130 individuals participate since we resumed this program, as well as, very importantly, more than 400 family members, thereby strengthening those ties. Child-friendly visits. It's a challenging experience, needless to say, for family members to travel to visit a loved one, and that certainly applies to their children as well. With some frequency, I take the Q100 bus, and you see little children on the bus. It's a time-consuming process for them that's stressful. So if on the other side, there awaits an opportunity to, as you can see on the slide, meaningfully engage with the parent, that certainly enhances the quality of that visit. So we are very proud that we're expanding this approach across facilities. Next slide, please. K9 program, ever popular and continues to afford we continue to be strategic in where we afford it. We provide it to individuals in enhanced supervision housing, the North Infirmary Command, as well as the Rose M. Singer Center. Here too, individuals, when they have a chance to interact with the dogs, you see that their demeanor changes, their focus changes. They happily interact with our staff. So another program that we continue to build on. We want to be targeted in the services we afford. We know that there's a sizable number of veterans in our custody. We know that they have different needs. And we also know, of course, that there are unique sets of benefits available to them. So we continuously inquire throughout the facilities who may be a veteran. We try to encourage them to move to our Veterans House in AMKC, which is going to continue in OBCC and has seen significant success. Next slide, please. You're familiar, I'm sure, with some of our gender responsive programs where we have providers who are uniquely trained to work with the female population. Another interesting program at Rosie's is a boutique. Again, I think our focus seeks to be rewards-oriented rather than punitive wherever possible. A great way to do that is through the boutique, where individuals, in exchange for participating in programs, in exchange for being infraction-free, can earn tokens, right, to select clothing of their choice. And it's been so successful that we recently expanded that to RNDC as well. And next slide, please. Tablet operations, a subject we have discussed in this forum a few times in the past. Happy to say that at this point, more than 5,300 tablets are in circulation, that we have created efficiencies where at this point, rather than finding individual in different facilities after that new admission period, we distribute the tablets at EMTC when we know someone is transitioning from new admissions to general population. So in this way, when they transfer to another facility, they already have a tablet on hand, and we minimize this sort of have versus have-not situation. I think my colleague Nell did a wonderful job speaking about counseling services, so I will not repeat that. And so next slide, please. So many things continue, and also new initiatives continue to be rolled out. It's not a secret. We all well know that sober living and substance use are challenges. And while there's a clinical element to it, right, another tool, if you will, to promote sobriety is really the like-mindedness. So a unit where the common denominator is a desire to be clean, a desire to have access to services, a desire to support one another, has been very successful in our jurisdictions. And I'm proud to say that under this administration, we're rolling that out in OBCC in September. Similarly, many individuals have an active interest in their reintegration, want to go focus on that beyond the groups that we afford, want to work with each other on that. So a unit where that is the central focus is also being rolled out at OBCC in September as well. Next slide. Last slide, I believe. Now that ministerial chaplaincy services, as I mentioned, they are back in the facilities. There's regular access to congregate services. We have sort of the bandwidth to also build out partnerships with community-based organizations, and there's significant interest in partnering with us. So now that our time allows for that, we're really trying to leverage the services that individuals in the community are affording. And lastly, you may have seen it, CBS, I believe it was, yes, CBS coverage of a new soccer program that we're rolling out at EMTC. As a Dutch person myself, I can speak to the need for soccer being a collaborative effort that builds team membership and just promotes healthy relationships and physical fitness. So we're happy to roll that out, and I'm also pleased to say that it comes with a community-based employment opportunities. So that's it in a nutshell. I'll turn it back to Ms. Torres.
So that concludes our PowerPoint presentation to you and the public today. We remain here to answer any questions you may have.
Good afternoon.
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Pitts, also chair of the board programming committee.
Thank you. Based on the information presented, I applaud DC Torres and the program unit for being proactive in the face of budget cuts and showing us that there are still ways that they will be able to deliver and meet the needs of our PICs. There was a lot of information delivered, so I will have to digest everything and make comparisons. And if I have questions, I will reach out later. But one question I do have at the moment is us making sure that we have sufficient security staff on hand for programs that are provided for in the unit and or escorts for programs that will be provided for the PICs out of the unit.
That is a great question, and I think that's something we have not shared with you, is that last November, the commissioner actually approached me and asked that I redefined what programs was for the department. And I embarked with a group of our members at the division as well as the facilities And we have been able to redefine as the facilities, and we have been able to redefine what programs are for us. And in doing so, there are now two subsets of what we call programs. One is facility operations or programs operations that is managed by the uniform members, leadership at the commands, and then what we call facility programs. That facility programs operation is now under our division. We have assigned at each of the facilities a non-uniform manager. They are known as executive directors. And I'm so happy that you've posed that question, because when it comes to having those executive directors, they are the lifeline to securing those escorts. They are the lifelines at any of our facilities to ensuring that when it comes to the facilitation of groups or the escorts, that we rely on that 72 number that I indicated at the opening statement. Because those officers now, with the commissioner's support and in response to the redefinition, they're actually part of our division. Number one. Number two, Board Member Pitts, we remain committed. We have been working since May 19 on how to ensure that this insourcing takes place. It has already commenced thanks to the enormous work that has been put forth by Assistant Commissioner McCarty and all of her leadership members within the counseling unit. We will remain available to you and the members of your internal programming and education groups in the next coming weeks to answer to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. And again, I applaud you and your unit.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yes, Board Member Sherman.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you all for a very impressive presentation. And it was really good to hear the full context in which the thinking has rolled out around the how the DOC will continue to provide programming in the face of the budget cuts to outside providers. I'd like to focus us a little bit on that. I think from the pie chart, that was the 21% of the overall pie. And up front, I would like to express my own deep concern about what is lost based on there not being programs provided by outside nonprofit partners to the department. And one thing that I understand is that there was a real emphasis by the nonprofit groups that provided programming in hiring and bringing staff onto the island who had lived experience. I didn't hear anything about work that's being done within the department to replicate that dimension. And I'm sure I will pose, I have a couple of questions and I will pose them, and I look forward to hearing your responses. But that does seem like something extremely important that should not be lost. The other thing I will say before asking a question is that it does seem that the $17 million that were cut in programs provided by outside nonprofits account for well over a third of the department's overall PEG. And I totally understand that the need to make very difficult decisions during this budget season. That seems like a disproportionate cut. That over, I don't know what percentage of the department's overall budget is dedicated to programs, or what percentage of the department's overall budget is dedicated to bringing nonprofit staff from nonprofits onto the island. But it does seem that the fact that these contracts accounted for roughly or over a third of the department's overall PEG in this year is disproportionate. What I'd like to hear about the plans to ensure that the programming that was provided continues is how the department crosswalked the specific programs that were provided by I think it was between 80 and 90 staff who came onto the island to provide services. And what programming is currently being provided to make up for the loss of those programs? Is there staff assigned to all of the facilities providing the same level of service that was being provided by the nonprofits? Is the level of service lower? Is the level of service higher currently?
So Ms. Torres, before you answer that, the end of that question, I just want to make a comment about the lived experience and the importance of it. Unfortunately, Black and brown communities in America have been dealing with over-policing and a lot of economic situations that have forced our communities to be justice involved. So clearly, when you run a department where over 70% of the workforce are persons of color, then you have people that have lived experiences, both direct experiences with being justice involved and indirect experiences with familial incarceration. And there's a percentage of our workforce, both uniform and non-uniform, that have the lived experiences that you're speaking about. And they come from the same zip codes that many of the men and women of majority of color that are incarcerated within our department. So you don't get lived experiences simply because you work at a nonprofit. We have a number of faith-based volunteers that have lived experiences and through their faith give back to our department and share those experiences with some of our young adults as well as some of our adults that are in our custody. And we have a number of volunteers from all walks of life that take time out of their lives so that other young men and other older men and women can hear about how they've turned their lives around. So we have a lot of people within our department that have lived experiences simply by the demographic of how our department is made up. And a lot of people should remember that. Ms. Torres, you can answer the rest.
In addition to that, many of our staff members, not just those assigned to our counseling unit, have had extensive work experience in the social service field. They have been previously assigned to work with our community-based organizations. We have also, in fact, hired, and we are committed to that. We cannot be a hypocritical department in which we are fighting for criminal justice, but do not value the experience of those that have been involved in the criminal justice system. And so we have, for many years, been hiring professionals that have had those lived experiences. If you want us to actually go into depth when it comes to how it is that we are covering the footprint that has been left by our contracted providers, I'm going to ask the very nervous Assistant Commissioner McCarty, that I hope by now has, and has done an incredible job, to actually take us through that. But I do want to share the following. Look, you're not going to get Ms. Torres to come into a public forum to diminish the work that has been done by our provider contracted partners. They continue to have a presence on island. They continue to provide services on island through different funding. But my goal is to share with you that when we are faced with an elimination of 17.1 out of 21.1 that we ended with, there was just two options. do as previous administrations have done, and mind you, I've been on Rikers Island as a provider since 1992 and as a member of service for the DOC since 2002. So the options that existed in the past was that when you are told that you're losing your budget, you simply have had the option of saying, oops, there goes the service. But throughout my career and through the careers of those members that are assigned to our division, we needed to act. We did not have the time to mourn the fact that we were losing partners and a contract. We needed to determine how it was that we were going to provide the services that are now known as insourced services. And we know that we have professionals and dedicated staff members who can do that for us. And so since May 19th, since we went to the public budget hearing, we have been working on that. And I do share with you that effective July 5th, our counseling members, associate correctional counselors, have been in those housing areas where we had providers doing services. And as of the week of July 10th, they have begun to provide the services that have been known as group facilitation. McCarty?
Yeah, I think I'm a little calmer now. No, but I do just want to, I think, like, triple emphasize the lived experience comment, and just really like echo what has been said, which is that there are members, specifically since I'm speaking to the counseling services unit, that have lived experiences from direct counselors all the way through leadership. And so lived experience is something that is important to us, along with other professional credentials, education, work experience, experience in nonprofits, experience in juvenile justice, experience in our own agency. So I just want to highlight that for you. When it comes to our footprint, we did have to adjust our schedules. I mentioned that just more broadly, I think in one of my talking points. And although it's not, I think, a perfect number because it might be in flux slightly right now, my anticipated number between our program counselors, our social workers, and our associate correctional counselors of units that we cover for group is around 130. And so that's just to demonstrate the units that we have our footprint in, which is very comparable, again, to what the contracted providers were also doing as well.
One second. Yes, Board Member Sherman, I'd like you to hold any further questions until another board member injects. Felipe?
Hi, everyone, and hi, Deputy Commissioner Torres and your team. It's amazing what you have done during difficult budget times. Could you help me understand a little bit better transitional planning services? And I think I clearly understood that you guys are meeting the needs of people in custody while at Rikers in terms of transitional planning. What comes to mind that I would really love to understand better is how do that looks when people return to the community? And I know, Commissioner Torres and your team are kind of really engaged in motivation and interviewing in CBT. So you really understand that the process of change takes a long time and people go through ambivalence. And in our experience, sometimes people need the support when they are in the community to fully get out of a line of mistakes and crime. How are we addressing that need for community supports for folks who want to transition back to the community?
Thank you so much, Board Member Franco, for that question. I need to emphasize that when it comes to our transitioning services, those transitioning services have not ceased to exist. We have a very strong working relationship with the Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice. I do need to emphasize that there are 10 very specific providers that have a large footprint within Rikers Island. Some of them, the 10 of them will continue to have the same presence. That presence has not been diminished. That presence has not been touched. Their contract has not been touched. So when it comes to that person that is getting ready to transition, they still have access to those providers that have been providing those transitional services since 2019.
There's no other questions from other board members. We'll go back to Board Member Sherman.
Thank you. I have a couple of additional questions. First, one of the things that I understand that many of the nonprofit providers did was to provide letters to people going to court, documenting their program participation and achievements. Is that something that department staff have already commenced doing? How will that process work?
That's a great question. You know, I do got to tell you that we've been providing court letters to our individuals assigned to our care for many years. And in those court letters, we always do a summary to the court as to the level of engagement, the certifications that the person in custody has completed. And McCarty, do you want to add more? But it is something that we've been doing probably since 2015, if not earlier.
Yes, and they will continue, and we do have, you know, a template that is on letterhead that will be provided to people based objectively on what they've completed with us. So course completions, certificates that they've earned, et cetera.
Thank you. The other
I
question,
will allow one more question,
so the other
just of time.
The other question that I have is about tracking and documenting services. How are you, and if there's written material that you can share, I would certainly be interested in seeing it. First of all, what are your objectives for, and you don't have to talk about your objectives for the entire array of programs. I'm really interested in this 20+% of the pie that you are now going to be responsible for. What specific objectives do you have? How will you be tracking whether you're meeting the objectives? And how will you be tracking level of service, both of your staff providing these services that we're talking about right now, and also the level of service of the responsibilities that these staff have moved out of in order to assume these new responsibilities, to make sure that work is not being left undone, that services, the level of service in those other important areas is not dropping as a result of this.
So I'm glad you're posing that question, and we'll be more than happy to come back to you with specific objectives that we have, share with you, the rest of the board and the public. I need to emphasize that for the last 2 years, our division has worked tirelessly in creating an internal data tracker for all services that are afforded, whether they are afforded by contracted providers and volunteers. I got to tell you that when Commissioner Molina last year asked that we assume the responsibility of the chaplaincy services, formerly known as ministerial services, when we had to guide our chaplains on how to do what we call the data trackers, I thought I was going to have a holy war, because in essence, our chaplains were, why are you tracking even the minute? And it is something that we've done. We track absolutely everything. And so we have that data. When we speak to you on numbers and data, we do it from that angle. We do it based on the information that we track for all of our services. And so we'll be more than happy to show you examples as well as follow up with the objectives and the goals.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, ma'am.
Well, thank you. I just have one thought or question in this area, and then we'll ask Board Member Bedard to return. I'm a forecaster by nature, and you went from 21.1 million to 17.1 as a number. Forecasting future pegs or whatever, what areas of reduction do you see to be impacted? Is it further in programming, or is it further in some other areas that might put you on target to meet the objectives that I don't usually miss my numbers, that's forthcoming?
No, it's a great question, and one that we're constantly thinking about. We've just started the fiscal year 24 budget, so we're a few months away from thinking about if we have to be in a situation as a city, if whether or not further cuts have to be made. Of course, as you know, we have the Interagency Task Force. The Office of Management and Budget is part of that task force, so we get the added support of the benefit of their just fiscal stewardship to make sure any future cuts don't come at the expense of safety and security, and as well as trying to continue to deliver services to the population in our care. But as of right now, there isn't anticipated any cuts, but it's very, very early.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. At this time, we'll ask if someone from staff can ask the board member Bedard to return. Thank you, DC Torres and team, for your presentation. It's gone a long time.
It's pretty thorough. Yeah, we're on that. We can share. No doubt. No, we're good.
CHS, again, I apologize for putting you on the back burner of this discussion. If you don't mind, I think there's going to be a few more questions to the department, and I'd like to just continue in that tone for now. So, board members, on the agenda, we have DOC's plans to address the concerns raised in the recent reports of the Nunez monitor. So, Commissioner, if you can address those concerns, or if board members have further thoughts or consideration.
Yeah, so maybe what I'll have to say might satisfy concerns, or they may not. Our department is responsive to and in communication with the Nunez monitor to address concerns raised in the monitor's report. The parties will be engaging in court-ordered meet and conferrals, and it would be inappropriate to discuss Nunez judgment case in a public setting before we meet with the monitoring team and all the parties involved and advise the court of our position in an August 7th joint letter to the court. If the monitor is concerned that any issue or issues mentioned in their recent reports are not being addressed sufficiently, the monitoring team will raise it to the department directly, and the department will address it accordingly. We've recently appointed a Nunez manager whose primary responsibility is to ensure clear and consistent communication between the department and the monitor. The monitor released, as you know, his last report July 10th, and the next court conference is scheduled for August 10th for any that want to attend.
Okay, thank you very much,
You're welcome.
Commissioner. We'll move forward based on the response to the next. Yes, Bobby?
Yeah, Commissioner, the Nunez monitoring has been going on since 2015, and it probably will continue for a while longer unless there's a receiver, which I hope will be the decision of Judge Swain. But you're telling us that we're not allowed to ask the department about violence, about stabbings, about locks that don't work, all the things that are covered in Nunez. I mean, I know that you do not let us use Janitech the way we were before. I know that you do not release names of people who have died in the system. but you're telling us we can't ask you anything about anything? You prefaced by saying that you thought you might start a fight, but congratulations. I think you have.
Just for point of information, the commissioner did provide in his opening statements some very impactful data on violence in the
Chair, I'm
jail.
talking to the commissioner, not to you.
Well, I'm responding to you. I said as a point of information. Okay, so at that point, we will move on at this time. Okay? Yes, go ahead.
Commissioner,
Yeah.
following the most recent back and forth with the monitor, the department announced that it was no longer going to share news of in-custody deaths with the public. Can you talk about your rationale for making that decision, please?
Thank you for that question, because I've explained my rationale a number of times. In 2016, when I was with the New York City Department of Corrections as the Chief Internal Monitor and Acting Assistant Commissioner Nunez, the department did not send out press releases regarding persons that passed away in custody. I then moved on to work in 2 other jurisdictions, both in Westchester County and in the city of Las Vegas. When there was a death in custody or someone passed away, we did not release press releases regarding those deaths in custody. It came to pass maybe a couple of years ago that, quite frankly, due to laziness of the former Public Information Office leadership at the time from the former administration, that they were tired of getting phone calls from reporters about those that passed away. So they came up with this solution, which I found, quite frankly, very disrespectful for those whose loved ones may have passed away, where the department would just send out a press release to just everyone, and in some cases, not even in enough time to notify the loved one. So we continue to notify this board. We notified the New York State Attorney General, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner. We notified the Federal Monitor. We notified the New York State Commission on Corrections. And we don't prevent any of those oversight bodies from publicly releasing that information if they want to do so. We also notify, if we can get them on the phone, the defense attorney representing the individual. But most importantly, we notify the next of kin. If one is listed and if one is not listed, we make every effort to try to find that person's family or loved one so that we can share the very devastating news that their loved one has passed away. And for the dignity of that person's family and the dignity of their transition, we feel that we wanted to be able to empower the families to be able to divulge how they want to the public, if they wanted to do so, that their loved ones has passed away. I've shared with this body that I have had family members that have been incarcerated and on the brink of considering taking their own lives. And I would not have want to find out on some news station that my loved one may have died or could have died. I would rather that information come directly from those who are responsible for taking care of them while they're justice involved and placed in our care. In addition to that, we told the media that if you call and ask us about it, we will confirm it. But if we have not notified the next of kin, we would ask you to reserve publicizing it until we had an opportunity to do that. We also created a process where those reporters that have an interest on knowing if someone passed away, that we have a listserv, and we would notify them of that information as well. But the only thing that we stopped doing was sending out press releases to the whole world in respect of not only the person that passed away, but in trying to be decent and humane to the loved ones that are gonna, at the end of the day, when the next day comes, they're gonna be feeling the loss of their loved ones for years to come. And that was my whole thought process. And I made it in concert with my lived experience that I've had in this situation, with having family members that I loved very much on the brink of possibly taking their own life.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go on to the next question, Commissioner, that's on the agenda.
Enhanced supervisionary housing. So our enhanced supervisory housing population recently just transferred, as I've stated publicly a number of times, we had this in the works, from GRVC to Rosie's. where it now is referred to as RESH, a completely separate command from the Rosie's Women's Facility. And that was completed on Tuesday, June 27th of this year. And it was overseen by the Department Security Team. The male individuals in Enhanced Supervisory Housing, ESH, cannot come into contact with the female population at Rosie's. As part of the renovations completed on a separate section of the unit, it received its own dedicated space, confined specifically to an area of the building that has sight and sound separation from the remainder of the facility by 2 solid partitions. As part of the department's board of plans to really close AMKC and reopen up OBCC, the former ESH units at GRVC will transition to become PACE, CAPS, and MO housing units, which I think are better suited with the environment at GRVC. Restraints previously used in these housing areas have been removed. The type of beds and/or level of security have remained unchanged. Similarly to how they were applied at GRVC, restraint tests are being used for individuals in level 1. And that's the update I have with ESH moving over to GRVC, but to Rosie's.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. Questions, please? Questions from online first? Anyone online? Board members, questions? Okay, Board Member Sherman?
Thank you. Yes, that is on. Commissioner, when I visited the new units, and the new RESH units, I was struck by the number of young adults, particularly in level 1 units, where there doesn't appear to be a structure or programming that is tailored to meet the needs of older adolescents. I'd like to understand what the department's thinking is around that, and to urge the department to look to the model put forth by the board in its most recent RMAS rulemaking, and really to consider how best to meet the needs, in particular, of the young adult population that is currently comprises a fairly large proportion of folks in those new units.
So they don't represent a large portion. I believe we have 27 young adults that are in our ESH. Our restrictive housing plan, which has been operationalized as ordered by the court, Judge Swain in this case, has to be approved by the monitor. And we have engaged with the recommended expert on restrictive housing, Dr. Jim Austin, who was recommended by the monitor on this undertaking on establishing a robust restrictive housing unit that can be effective with lowering violence within the city's jail system. And that's what we have done. If you have specific questions regarding programming that is happening in the restrictive housing unit, it is very robust and is pretty significant for the small population of percentage of individuals that we have placed in restrictive housing.
My specific questions are about programming and an environment that is tailored to meet the needs of the young adult population.
And I think the Assistant Commissioner is about to respond to that question.
Hi. So since I do oversee the program counselors who are assigned to the ESH housing units, I would like to identify just how programming is modified, specifically when we work with people who are the ages of 18 to 21 in these housing units. And, actually, surprisingly, oftentimes it goes beyond that, right? Up until people are even 24. Sometimes our materials get modified. So on any given day, we offer 4 hours of programming per tier. So that is, and our goal is to have that 5 days a week, that we would have that 4 hours per tier of programming, primarily conducted by program counselors. Within that time frame, they may go over multiple different types of components. And so some of those, let's say, I used the example of anger management earlier and how we use the SAMHSA anger management curriculum, specifically when we target or work with the adult population, which is a curriculum that can be adapted and modified for a younger adult population. But I would like to use this as the example because with the young adult population, we actually have a totally different curriculum. It's made by this organization called Life Skills. It's something that is tailored to a different reading level. It uses different examples within the throughout the curriculum material. And so there is an effort for us to actually take time to identify what curriculum would be better or more appropriate based on somebody's reading level, based on somebody's life experience, based on the examples that may be given. But I do want to say on any given day, it may not be, if you walk in and let's say we have our enhanced recreation staff on unit. That might not be tailored specific to somebody who is 19 or 20. But if you walk in and you see a counselor or a group happening, they may even be doing dialectical behavioral therapy, skill building techniques. So something like distress tolerance skill building. Those examples, although possibly a worksheet or the curriculum may look uniform across the actual unit, the conversations that are happening one-on-one, specifically in units like the ESH level 1 houses where we are having to kind of navigate the space in order to create those group sessions would be tailored to the needs of that person who is 18 to 21.
Commissioner, when I toured RESH last week, because the units are physically a little bit smaller, right? The restraint desks are closer together, and there had been incidents of people of slashing from one person at a desk to another, and that had resulted, this is my understanding of how this all happened, in having people additionally have a wrist shackled while they're sitting at the desk, which means that people are now shackled by both feet and a hand. Is that the permanent solution to that problem, or is there potentially going to be other modifications there? Because obviously that's incredibly uncomfortable and felt frankly unsafe to many of the PIC I spoke to.
Yeah, so there are a number of solutions that we're exploring, hoping that it is not going to be a permanent solution to have to continue to use 3-point restraints. But we want to make sure that we're keeping individuals safe that have a high propensity for violence, and that's why they're in level 1. So we're exploring some environmental improvements that we could possibly make between the different desks, as well as thinking about how we can shorten the length of possibly the restraints that in the leg area that could possibly limit mobility of a person to be able to reach out and assault another person in custody.
And then another sort of just physical plant follow-up, there've been this issue of the doors being kicked out. Can you just speak to that?
So we have had our facilities teams in those units to make repairs as doors get damaged. As you know, doors have been a significant issue throughout the department. So it's not only an issue with damage that the person in custody may do on the door itself, but making sure that we are doing enhanced training with our staff to ensure that doors are properly secured as well.
I think my understanding from this tour I recently did was that the Rosie's doors are in some way easier for PIC to kick open from the inside, and that people were popping out of their cells. Is that a facility issue? Like, do those doors need to be reinforced in some way?
Yeah, so what we did is we had our facilities maintenance teams begin welding plates over the cell locking mechanisms to prevent tampering, and it was a tampering issue. And we've also had all the food slots, make sure that those food slots are operable so that we can deliver food items and other items via the food slot instead of having to open the door completely.
And then my last physical plant question was a major issue that people were complaining about was the phone jacks and access to phones, and reliance on tablets, but then people having broken tablets or not having headphones. Can you just speak to that as well?
So yeah, so there are individuals that have broken their own tablets for whatever motivation they had to do that. But what we did was we are installing the jacks along the cells so that individuals that don't have tablets can have access to their phone, as well as putting locking mechanisms by the day room phones for also individuals can be escorted to the day room phone to make their calls as well. You're welcome.
And thank you, Commissioner. At this time, we'll move on to visitation issues concerning people in custody housed in West Facility.
Good afternoon, Good afternoon, board members. So at this time, EMTC is undergoing necessary construction in order to open the visits area in the EMTC facility. So in the meantime, visits for people at EMTC have been occurring at West Facility on the West Facility contact visit floor. Construction at EMTC is expected to be completed the next couple of weeks, hopefully by the end of the summer, and then the visits floor can ideally then become operational. As the board is aware, the EMTC visits occurring at West Facility affects visits for people housed at West. To accommodate visits for people housed at West Facility, the department is actually assessing modifying a couple of the non-contact visit booths to be able to offer contact visits at this time. And so we have our security team doing an assessment of potentially removing some plexiglass and modifying some non-contact visit booths at West to be able to offer contact visits at West Facility.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from the board?
I do.
Yeah, Board Member Sherman.
So it is encouraging to hear that the expectation is that the renovations that are being done at EMTC are expected to be finished soon. Is there a specific date on which the department expects to be able to resume visits at EMTC?
I'm happy to get back to you with one after I speak more in depth with the team. As you know, and the Commissioner is about to speak to this, a lot of our maintenance has been sort of focused on getting OBCC up to a place where we can open it and get people safely moved in there. So a lot of facility maintenance work has been focused there. I'll check in to see where we are with the EMTC visits floor. It is a gymnasium, the visits floor, so it's work is required to the corridor to access the visit space. And so that's specifically the area that we need to work on, just for awareness.
Well, thank you for that transition, Ally. And so Commissioner, if you can go right into the plans to open OBCC and close AMKC.
Sure. As I've mentioned before, the AMKC is a really just old facility that has a lot of infrastructure issues due to the fact that it wasn't upkept since around fiscal year 2018 and just has been allowed to deteriorate. The plan to close AMKC has been put in place to provide a higher level of care, custody, and control for the people housed on Rikers Island and consists of multiple movements as I'm going to share with you now. I shared briefly earlier about the movement of ESH from GRVC to Rosie's, and that happened on June 27th of this year. We are going to be moving city sentenced persons in custody and those with low security classifications from GRVC to the annex at EMTC. This movement is scheduled to be placed sometime around late July. We also plan on moving persons in custody in AMKC's MO units, CAP units, and PACE units to GRVC, and movement from persons in custody in AMKC's GP units to OBCC. That is going to be happening tentatively between on or about July 24th and August 7th as we stage those transfers, because the transfers are not only people in custody, but also the staff that has to accompany them and swing space that has to be done so that that can happen. So maintenance and construction work has been ongoing at OBCC, has been conducted by not only our facilities maintenance and repair division teams, but also by our partners through Department of Design and Construction. What I mentioned before, the Interagency Task Force, they're a key member on that Interagency Task Force, and they've been a good partner with us being able to get OBCC up and running. And all construction was self-funded. The transfers of the person in custody from AMKC to beginning of various facilities will also begin that same week. Not everybody's going to go to OBCC. Some will go to GRVC, some will go to other locations as well.
Questions, those online, board members? Any questions, Itzad?
I just wanted to confirm, so the movement of the therapeutic units at AMKC to GRVC, is it 1-to-1, like the number of beds is being matched, or are there more is there potential to have more therapeutic beds due to
Yeah,
this move?
that's a good question, and we've talked about this before. My hope is to increase the therapeutic bed availability by moving to GRVC. I mean, what we're talking about at OBCC really presents a unique opportunity to really renovate not only a facility to make sure it's up to par, but really start a facility from the beginning at a higher standard of correctional excellence for not only the experience of those that are in custody, but also for the workforce. So we worked with CHS to ensure that specialized housing units, including KEEP, our MO units, our PACE and CAP units are relocated across all of our DOC facilities, but looking to try to increase the number of therapeutic beds in each housing unit at GRVC as well.
And in this sort of acute period of moving, will everybody who's in a therapeutic bed at AMKC be put into a therapeutic bed immediately on transfer?
Unless CHS says otherwise, yes.
I just have one question, which is you mentioned that the construction was all self-funded, and I just wanted to make sure I understood that. Does that mean it was funded out of expense dollars rather than capital dollars, or does it mean something else?
Well, as you know, because of the local law that closes the island from use of as detaining operations, we cannot use capital improvement dollars when available to us. And one of the things that we had was the original plan that was in motion to deal with doors. Part of that plan was at AMKC, as you may or may not be aware. We have the same mechanical locking mechanism issues at AMKC that we used to have at RNDC. And at RNDC, we replaced 900 doors at that facility to much more improved locking doors to keep persons in custody safe, as well as our staff. Given the number of doors that had to be replaced, given the time requirement for the closure of Rikers Island, to spend $10 million of taxpayer money, we would not have been able to complete all those doors in that tight time frame. Things could have happened, supply chain issues, there's a whole host of issues, bandwidth of being able to do that work. And I need to make people safe as soon as possible and not through a long drawn-out process. So while we were evaluating what alternatives there were, the alternative was OBCC, which had a lot of good bones, but needed just a little bit level of construction and TLC to get it operational to the standard we needed to be at, both staffing-wise and infrastructure-wise, in order to make sure that we can improve the in-custody experience for those that are in our custody. So that was part of the monies that were used in order to facilitate the construction improvements that we needed to do at OBCC in order to close AMKC.
What was the overall budget for that?
I'd have to get back the number to you because I don't have it on top of my head.
Thank you.
And I actually didn't ask this, but were there physical plant modifications made at GRVC as well?
There may be. I mean, I can tell you, I mean, whatever standards CHS required for the delivery of their medical services to therapeutic units that they needed, I mean, I think all of that is being done for GRVC.
And we'll be able to tour, July 24th is when you said.
Well, it's between July 24th and August 7th, but of course, you're always welcome to come anytime you like.
Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. There's one final question. Board, staff, staffing concerns, triple tours reporting.
Yeah, so I'm going to have Deputy Commissioner Ron Edwards, who is our Deputy Commissioner of Administration, has over 30 years of just experience in the business, and I think he just was going to share with you your response regarding the staffing issues. DC Edwards.
Good afternoon. Board Commissioner Bart Bailey had brought this up about EMTC and unreporting of triples. So the term triple tour in New York City Department of Corrections is quite ambiguous. So an individual assigned to the morning tour that starts at 6 o'clock in the morning is required to work 8.5 hours. If they're needed to fulfill another post for another 8 hours, that would be 16.5 hours. By the time the relief came to that, that person would automatically be in default of a triple. The other part, when Mr. Bailey came in to audit, he looked at the timesheets. So according to the policy, you have to sign in upon entering the facility, not working. So individuals usually report a little bit early. Around, if again, we're going to use 6 o'clock in the morning as your start time, they're coming in at 5:30 in the morning to beat traffic to get ahead. So they're signing in at 5:30. By the time that they're relieved on time, they would automatically go into 17 hours by default. Mr. Bailey brought up a teletype that was issued back in 2016, and I read it verbatim. For monitoring purposes only, a triple shall be construed as any time worked in excess of 16 and a half consecutive hours. So I utilize the word worked, and we use that for reporting purposes. So a late relief in the correctional business or anywhere else is common. So when should we report the triples? It's when you're working on a post and you're waiting for a relief in excess of half an hour to an hour. And it's a late relief, but it's not really a triple. The reason why a lot of facilities report the triple at 3.5 hours is because the practice is to give those staff members the next day off because they exceeded a certain amount of time. And for health reasons, they don't have to come to work on the next tour. Because if you looked at the clock, they would only get 4 or 5 hours sleep and have to report. They're not going to be functional. So the practice was any individual that exceeded that time period be given a time off for the next day. I can assure you that this is a priority for this administration to stop individuals from even entering the 17th hour. Some things are unavoidable. We have an emergency run. The officer gets assigned over to an outpost. By the time the officer goes to their lineup, the relief officer goes to their lineup, pulls out the equipment necessary to effectuate his job, goes over to, say, Elmhurst to relieve the officer, then that officer who's already passed 16 and a half hours has to get transportation, go back to the facility, turn in all of their equipment, and then get signed out. So they're going to go past 17 and a half hours. We try everything in our power to avoid that. And we implemented some mechanisms that are catching it to enhance the tour commander so that they can identify these individuals ahead of time so we can start the process early. I.e., if another person's working overtime, we can get that person to go relieve them. So we are taking this extremely serious, and no one's underreporting. They're actually reporting things that are not necessarily time worked.
Thank you, Deputy Commissioner Edwards. You stated something in the beginning that was very concerning to me. And I know you started by talking about your triple reporting as ambiguous. Is there a great degree of difference between board staff reporting of this incident or these incidents versus your understanding of the triple? And
In this instance, Bart Bailey recorded 104 sign-in that were early prior to the start of their shift. And if they had done their time, it would have surpassed 16 and a half hours, hence have to be reporting as a triple based on the teletype issued in 2016. It should be noted that Mr. Bailey quoted 2 individuals that were in excess. One of them was an error or sloppy penmanship, and it looked like a 0100, but in actuality it was 0700. So, and to Mr. Bailey's defense, it was sloppy penmanship. I would have thought it was a 1-2. It wasn't until I pulled the overtime slip and it said 7 o'clock in the morning. So that person was not even near the 16. There was an individual that Mr. Bailey did quote, that did go 3 hours over, and it was exactly what I just stated. He was on an emergency run. By the time the officer went there to relieve them, briefed the individual, turned over the pedigree, and then returned back to the facility. He did go over he was 3 hours over.
Yeah, being that this is it seemed to have been a huge concern to board members. I will ask, our interim executive director to further intervene into review with yourself, Deputy Commissioner, and our staff involved in the review so that there's clear understanding of what the reporting requirements are. And then also if we can have some type of procedure that's not as ambiguous in this this topic area.
I understand. And one of the reporting should be a late relief versus a triple or going into a triple tour. You will have a late relief just based on logistics. You go to lineup can take 20 minutes. By the time that you walk down to your post, count your persons in custody, go over the equipment, you can exceed, and it's considered a late relief throughout the industry of corrections. So I think that it has to be more defined into what is a late relief and what is actually an individual going into trouble.
Thank you.
If I may just add to
Go ahead,
that,
Commissioner.
which might provide some clarity. One is what we're talking about here in the 100 or so instances where it was believed that these individuals were in a triple, it was actually just one individual because the others were being defined by the sign-in time versus the actual work time. The second thing is, and DC Edwards is humble in not stating this, is that he's been also leading the scheduling project. Because we have been a paper-based system for so long, we have been working with a provider right now, technology provider, in trying to evaluate how do we digitize this whole process so that our control rooms can be making on-the-ground decisions of when people are close to possibly going into a triple or approaching that so that they can make better staffing decisions. So not only is the scheduling and digitizing of that and the scanning going to improve that these things don't happen, they can generate reports once it's rolled out to determine are people on triples, how many people are doing doubles, because I don't want people doing doubles either. That's also problematic for us as we sort of navigate this. The other thing that we did was we removed assistant deputy wardens from their offices, and now assistant deputy wardens are in the control room of the facilities because they can better navigate and quarterback the day-to-day operations from the control room with the assistance of the control room captain to have a macro view of the entire facility so that they can make better staffing decisions to make sure that these staff are not only deployed on priority posts, but anticipating where do we need to redeploy staff from courts, shift reduce non-detainee facing posts so that staff can be properly relieved. The other issue is addressing it from a nutrition standpoint. We currently have about 600 funded vacancies for correction officers. We've had significant attrition in correction officers. Through the interagency task force and working with our partners in DCAS, we have been able to do really, and I think Dr. Gonzalez shared with you last time, what our recruitment strategy to recruit individuals that want to be career correction officers, which is a very noble profession, so that people in our community can be part of the change that they want to see in their criminal justice system. So it's not just about delineating and defining what's a triple, but what is the solution to make sure that people are not going into triples, which have been significantly reduced under this administration. And I would prefer that people don't go a minute into their triples. And now we're dealing with how do we deal with the doubles so that individuals are not here for a full double shift as well. We need our workforce to not continue to be overtaxed. And we're trying to balance this as our detainee population not only increases, but the percentage of that population dealing with mental illness and other substance addiction issues that make this population vulnerable. We need our officers to be alert. And part of being alert is make sure that that officer not only has a good work-life balance, but has the time to recover from their shift so that they can work the next day.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Badura.
I just wanted to clarify about the doubles. People are not getting scheduled to work, like all of these triples are people who shouldn't have also been working a double to begin with, or they're being scheduled to work doubles and then potentially.
Yeah, so they're not, nobody is scheduled to work doubles, right? I mean, situations happened within a jail. We have people that we have to bring to medical appointments, right? Where our staff is doing thousands of escorts a day. Now we have, like in Rosie's, for example, allow some patients to take themselves to their appointments so that we can alleviate that stress. But this is people, we're not scheduling to doubles or scheduling to triples. We're responding to in a dynamic way of the operational needs of a particular facility.
So the 104 triples that Bart had potentially erroneously recorded, but those were definitely 104 doubles that should.
Oh, they were likely 104 doubles, yeah.
That's.
Yeah, and I'm not, and doubles should not be a relied upon practice. It obviously costs money to put people on doubles because they're making overtime.
Right.
And we would like to be in a place where we're balancing the workload of the needs of the population, programming, medical appointments, and all those things, visitation. We now have family visitation in person, which is huge on the weekends. That's taxing the department. So that's why it's got to be a technology strategy, a recruitment strategy, a training strategy for both officers and supervisors to make better operational decisions. We have almost all of our facilities now with outside new facility leaders and our Assistant Commissioner of Facility Operations. They're bringing with them a wealth of best practices from the jurisdictions where they work. And that will also, I think, have a trickle-down effect on how we professionalize what we've been doing over the last 19 months. You're welcome.
I have a question. Thank you both for that. That was extremely helpful. And I know that we share the goal of not having staff work doubles or triples to the extent possible. As I understand, the board in its oversight capacity relies upon access to facility timekeeping records. And over the past several weeks, I understand that that access has been interrupted. And I would ask that that access be restored so that we can continue. And I agree with the chair, we should certainly continue to discuss when we, as an oversight body, identify issues. We should make sure that we discuss them with you and we understand the operational circumstances that led to what we are seeing on paper. In order to fulfill our responsibility, we do need access to the records. And in this case, this is timekeeping records, and I would ask that that access be restored.
Okay, well, thank you, Commissioner,
Thank you.
for your report and your team. This is a smaller room, less oxygen. Is it okay for a 5-minute break before we continue? We'll take a 5-minute break and resume with CHS. Thank you. Good job.
Yeah. Plus, like, at some point. Yeah. No, we actually like, they like messed up and I like kind of got upset with myself. Like, people went to the most sober living environment because we're in. So it's like, okay, great. No, yeah, no, it absolutely was, because our goal is literally for the average person who just doesn't want to be on a, like, it could be anybody, you could have never. Not, like, you could have no substance abuse issues, as long as you're just willing to be like, but not right here. Okay, that's her fault.
Yeah, and then one thing was too. Is that all? Things that pay.
Yeah.
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 So if for some reason.
Yeah.
But just.
Have you guys looked at GRBC for any dating?
We.
Okay, so that's selfish, like, go there because we have like really strong.
If you want to.
Advocate.
Folks for that, but we wouldn't say that. We tried, we're gonna.
Okay.
So, different places. Okay. I think we can try to that.
Yeah.
Both. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. We, I don't need the gavel because this is not a formal session, but we will proceed at this time. Board Member Sherman will join us in one moment. But in the interest of time, we will get started now. So I'll ask Dr. Sabeti, my apologies, Dr. Sabeti, if you can begin your presentation on the overview of Correctional Health Services Simulation Center.
Sure, thank you very much. Again, I'm Bipin Subedi. I'm the CMO for CHS, here with Jeanette Merrill, who's our Communications Director, and Nancy Arias, who's our Chief Nursing Officer, and she'll be actually giving the presentation, so I'll kick it over to her.
There we go. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share an overview of our Correctional Health Services Simulation Center. Next slide, please. So a brief introduction of CHS Simulation Center. It's a little larger, yeah. I don't know if people can see it. Yeah, it's up there. Yeah. So CHS offers CHS medical and nursing staff innovative and quality-driven learning opportunities to enhance their teamwork and clinical skills. It operates as a satellite to New York City Health and Hospital Institute for Medical Simulation and Advanced Learning at Jacobi Medical Center. We currently have 3 staff members who graduated from the Simulation Fellowship Program. It is designed to support and promote the highest quality of care for correctional service patients. It is staffed by members of the Nursing Education Department, operational 7 days a week. However, we also have members of our medical team who are our partners within the Simulation Center training services. Next slide, please. So some of our learning opportunities include, but are not limited to, the emergency response scenarios, debriefing skills, intravenous access skills, wound assessment and management, basic life support and advanced cardiac life support trainings, hand hygiene, and catheterization skills. Next slide, please. Here you will see what our education environment looks like. And it is a simulation lab classroom to the left-hand side. Basically, our staff are trained on how to use the electronic medical record, medical administration record, as well as other electronic systems that we use to care for our patients. And on the right-hand side, you will see our patient care area, which simulates our clinic treatment room spaces within our clinical care environment treatment areas in each of our facilities. Next slide, please. So some of our on-site resources also include a crash cart, EKG machines, defibrillators, portable suction machines, and all these items are the same items that you would see if you had been in any one of our clinic areas where we provide treatment to our patients. Some of our clinics have more than one in any of our strategic locations where we provide care. Next slide, please. Other on-site resources in the simulation center are a CPR station. We have our part task trainers, which are specific training modules that are used to train our staff on how to do blood draws and insert IVs, as well as special body parts to focus on training. With the below, you will see that it's focusing on how to provide wound care on our patients. Next slide, please. Our emergency response perk bag, which is used in each of one of our emergencies. It is fully equipped, such as what EMS carries to emergency responses in the community. We are fully equipped to do the same with our emergency response bag. We do training not only in the simulation center, but also within our facilities on a monthly basis with our nursing and our medical providers, because being familiar with the content within this bag is critical to the provision of care on emergency responses. Next slide, please. Other materials that we also carry in the emergency response situation is also PPE, which is protective personal equipment, as well as intubation supplies, which are additional materials that you'll need to help to support providing emergency care to save a life. Next slide, please. So as you saw earlier, within our training space, we have what simulates a treatment room, and these 2 individuals are our mannequins. These mannequins are actually anatomically correct and fully interactive mannequins. So training ranges from listening to the patient's breath sounds to doing ear irrigations with these mannequins. Next slide, please. So the Simulation Center accreditation process was completed by Correctional Services. CHS Center and its health and hospital counterparts passed the Society for Simulation in Healthcare accreditation process in January of 2023. SSH is a professional membership organization that advances the application of medical simulation in healthcare. H&H also received commendations on exemplar programs of this year's annual international meeting on simulation in healthcare. To pass the SSH accreditation evaluation, the CHS simulation team led a comprehensive review of its standards, fellowship programs, system integration efforts, teaching and education work, and research and assessment initiatives. The staff also ensured that the physical simulation space met SSH-specific standards, which were many, and I want to give a lot of credit to the nursing staff and the medical staff of CHS that did a lot of work to make this come into accreditation, as we did a lot of work with Jacoby. Next slide, please. So center training since April 22 to April 23, we've done 67 orientation sessions, 5 one-on-one remediation sessions, which means that when we identify any staff that need further remediation in their skill sets, we have one-on-one sessions with our nursing staff. And we just recently had one in September, but every year since the Simulation Center has been open, we have one simulation day where it's offered to all clinical staff on Rikers Island to come in and have hands-on training, all the multi-session events. And post-training surveys and mock drills are also used to measure staff development within the center. Next slide, please. So looking ahead, we're looking forward to building out staffing at the center, expanding the provided services, and introducing new training opportunities. The center is located in Trailer 3 on Rikers Island, and we invite board members to visit, especially during our simulation week in this coming September of 2023. Any questions? That's it. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, board members. Any questions on the presentation of the CHS Simulation Center? Okay, there being none, thank you for your wonderful presentation. And we'll go directly to public comments at this point. And we'll start with PIC public comments at this time.
Hello, my name is Paul Alexander, and I've been an inmate here on Rikers Island Jail for almost 3 years now, and my booking and case number is 241-200-2165, and I'm in NIC. Again, my name is Paul Alexander, and I'm in NIC. There's just 2 quick things. The first thing is, anytime I make a call, there's like a really, really long message. It's like 2 minutes long. And it says, this is a call from Rikers Island. It could be recorded and it could be used against you. If you're a lawyer, go to GOVC to register this number as a lawyer's number. I mean, this message just goes on and on and on. That's why most people hang up. Like if they, it says it could also be a fraud call. When I call my sister, it flashes fraud. It doesn't make sense. You just say, this is a call from Rikers Island, it's being recorded, and, that's it. It doesn't have to talk about lawyers and they can register this number. It's just so long, the message. People get sick of it and they hang up. So if they could fix the message. They keep calling the recreation and the law library at the same time. Like today, I was in the law library and they called recreation, so I missed the hour outside. You know, I'm stuck in this little room for 24 hours straight, and the hour outside makes a huge difference. And, you know, to have that taken away, you know, I mean, and the worst part about it is I'm innocent. You know, I was set up in a New York City vice unit detective sting operation with them lying and deceiving me. And, you know, I'm being here for 3 years based on the cops' crimes and lies they've committed. But, you know, just the issues here, you know, that's why there's so many problems and so many issues, is because it's not, you think it's the COs, but it's
Hey, how you doing? This is Dwayne Singleton. Today's date is 6/21/2023. I'm locked in jail on Rikers Island in AMKC. Housing area 5 Lower, number 1512. AMKC, better known as C95 18-18, Daisy Street, East Elmhurst, Common, New York, 11370. I have a bad situation concerning Preston Hardy, R-I-S-T-E-N. Preston Hardy is locked up in Green Correctional Facility in upstate New York. 23R0740. I'm not going to talk to you anymore unless you send somebody to come visit me. That's all I have to say.
Hi, my name is Virgil Carter, and I'm currently housed in West Facility CDU. My purpose for this phone call is because that Miller that runs CDU and NIC is using NIC and CDU, West Facility, as solitary confinement. I am told day by day that I'm in CDU because of security purposes, and I am being housed here for solitary confinement purposes. I have no ticket, done anything wrong, and I would like for this to be addressed. Once again, my name is Virgil Carter. Booking case number 825-23-00-218. Thank you.
The caller has hung up.
Okay, we'll have public comments for those that are present. Christopher Boyle.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Christopher Boyle. I'm with New York County Defender Services. I'm the Director of Data Research and Policy. Just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. One is the commissioner mentioned that he reaches out to all the families of the decedents. That's just false. We had a death of one of our clients, Joshua Valles, who was in ICU for a very long while and was never contacted by the Department of Corrections at any point in time. So I just think that that's just a fallacy, and that shouldn't be allowed to be stated on the record. One of the other things I wanted to bring up was the new ESH housing in the Rosie unit. I went on, I believe it was July 5th or July 6th, to go see a client. I walked in there and I talked to the desk officer, and he basically told me, we don't know how we're doing this yet. You're just going to have to sit and wait and be patient. I waited well over an hour with another attorney from Brooklyn Defender Services, who apparently had been there for over an hour prior to me getting there. It wasn't until I asked for a captain and to see a captain that they said, okay, we're going to see what we're going to be able to do to take you back here. They brought an officer over to us. We walked through the back. Clearly, it was very, very deep into the facility, lots of different hallways I had to go through to actually get to where the unit was. The area where they were allowing us to have a council visit was literally right next to the dormitory where everybody was being housed. If you're familiar with the bubble, I was able to see the bubble where I was. I was told to go into basically a cell area on one side, and the client was in the cell area on the other side. There was plexiglass in between us so we could have a conversation. My door was not locked. I explained to the officer I was only going to be about 10 or 15 minutes. I don't know how long the Brooklyn Defenders attorney was going to be, but I made it clear that I wanted to be able to leave not that long after my conversation with the client. They said, yeah, no problem. There literally is no place for anybody to sit. It's a hallway with no chairs, no desk area. It's essentially looks like part of the dormitory. I had my conversation. I opened the door, empty. There was no officer. Nobody said to me, here's where you need to go afterwards. Nobody gave me any information at all. I wandered around. I walked downstairs. I went to a door. There was a captain on the other side of the door. They finally opened the door for me. I then said, okay, what am I supposed to do here? They didn't really communicate with me much. There was a captain and another officer. The door opened. The officer walked out. I followed the officer. I then followed her all around until I realized she was not taking me out. She was taking me to another dormitory. I am 6'5". It's pretty difficult to miss me when I'm walking behind somebody, but apparently she did. She turned around. She said, oh, what are you doing here? I said, I'm trying to get out of the facility. So they then said, okay, we'll walk you around. It was very clear to me that they did not know what they were doing at the facility in terms of who was responsible for taking the lawyers to a council area, who was going to wait for them, because I go see more than one person. If I get trapped in there for 2 or 3 hours, that's it. I'm not seeing anybody else when I'm there. I have other people in my office that I wouldn't recommend to go until there is a procedure in place for this. And there clearly was not. So I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that. Thank you very much.
Natalie Irazino, I believe it is.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. Don't mind me. I typed this up just now. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Fiorenzo. I'm a corrections specialist at New York County Defender Services. I'd like to use my time today to touch on topics that were discussed in today's meetings. First, I'd like to thank the board for creating yet another meaningful agenda, just like last time. It does feel as though there's been a bit of a shift here where our testimonies aren't just kind of shouting into a void. Thank you for including in your updates that you are investigating the fire from NIC in April, and I do look forward to seeing that report when it is finished. I hope that the investigation into the fire is indicative of a commitment to investigation and further reporting in general. And I would please like to ask you again to investigate the circumstances surrounding the death of our client, Joshua Valles, who was initially reported to have died of a heart attack until his autopsy revealed that it was indeed a fracture to his skull. There's still no information on what caused that fracture to his skull while in custody. The handling of Mr. Valles' death illuminates Commissioner Molina's lack of care for the people in his custody and their families. His reasoning for non-disclosure of deaths in custody is insincere, to put it politely. Please don't let Mr. Get Him Off My Count fool you into thinking that he is concerned about the family members of those who are killed or injured in his custody. Mr. Valles was on life support for days, as my boss, Christopher Boyle, mentioned, before his loved ones were notified. I'm going to shift now to talk about the programming cuts, the $17 million cut in programming. The department, the programming unit, earlier testified today that they're not losing counseling program because they're still offering it. It's just in a group setting now. I don't think any of us really need convincing the difference between individualized counseling and group counseling. I certainly don't go to therapy in front of 12 of my peers to discuss my most vulnerable emotions and issues. It's obvious that individualized counseling is an irreparable loss that will not be addressed by the department. And it was also reported, despite what the department shared today, that there in fact will be a cut to reentry programming, including job training, financial literacy, drug relapse prevention, and anger management programming. This is based on an article by Matt Katz for Gothamist. What I want everyone to keep in mind as we discuss the programming cut is that this is happening while the department spent earlier this year $100,000 on sniper rifles, $90,000 on high-powered submachine guns, which a former assistant deputy warden of DOC said will never be used. There's no reason to use them in department work. And $250 million that they testified to here at a board hearing for their new NYPD Palace equivalent training facility that could have done the $17 million cut 14 times over. Lastly, I would like to remark on the death of our client, William Johnstone, who passed away on Saturday while in custody. He adamantly asked for housing, counseling, and employment, and he just wanted a life of stability. Please remember our clients and their greater affected communities as you continue your work on this board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Natalie.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Klinger. I'm a jail services attorney with Brooklyn Defender Services. Thank you for the opportunity to provide comment today. At the outset, we too wish to take a moment to acknowledge the death of William Johnstone at Rikers Island this past weekend, a person that we also represented and who was being held on unaffordably high bail since late March. We mourn his passing alongside his loved ones and all who are affected by his death, but we're also angered and saddened by the Department of Corrections' failure to protect the health and safety of the people entrusted to its custody. We need to draw your attention to 3 additional issues. First, at Brooklyn Defender Services, we've long been concerned about the department's plan to move the ESH unit to RMSC. Based on a sampling of our clients' experiences over recent weeks, it seems the department was not prepared for many aspects of the housing of that population in the new setting. One of our clients is forced to sit in his darkened cell, too dark even to read, for 17 hours a day because the department can't or won't turn on his ceiling light until 8 p.m., and even then, only for 3 hours. Another whose contact visits at GRVC ESH units sustained him and helped him remember his own humanity, now has only non-contact visits, and only because his housing unit is not designed to allow for contact visits. Multiple BDS clients at RESH also report that they suddenly no longer have access to commissary. Not on the phone, not using the app on their tablets. They're told that IT is working on it. Each of these issues, no light, no contact visits, no commissary, represents an additional and unnecessary level of deprivation that we already know profoundly harms our clients. Second, this is about the heat, acknowledging that we heard that there will be a forthcoming report, and we're grateful for that. We just point out that 2 years ago, when the board produced its summer 2020 heat report, it found in that report that even in air-conditioned units, temperatures exceeded 80 degrees on 76 different occasions. We do have a client who, with asthma, reported difficulty breathing. Multiple times he requested medical attention. He was told it's hot everywhere. And we also have a report that in a heat-sensitive dorm at EMTC, there was insufficient cooling. So we look forward to the board's report on this, but also we are concerned about what's going on this summer. And if that report comes out in a couple months, I guess there's still a request to make that an urgent request to the department. And finally, at last month's board meeting, the department said the proposed cuts of $17 million would not impact reentry programming. But last week, a report in New York Focus suggested otherwise when it highlighted the challenges faced by returning individuals who need a letter of incarceration in order to restore their government benefits are having a harder time getting those letters because the programs that used to help them have been cut. We already had questions about how the department can possibly hope to do so much of the work previously contracted out to experts with lived experience, cultural competence, and significant training. But now we must also ask, what is the department doing to make sure that people returning home at a minimum are not being stymied by the department as they seek to restore their critical government assistance? Thank you.
Thank you. Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips.
Peace and blessings, everyone. I'm Chaplain Dr. Victoria A. Phillips, CEO and founder of Visionary V Ministries and longstanding active member of the Jails Action Coalition. I'm also supposed to be the co-chair of the Young Adult Task Force, which we haven't met lately. However, I stand before you on my own name. No affiliations today. Let me be very clear. When is the last invitation that this board has received to the graduation in RNDC? Because for the last 2 years, I have not received any, and I've attended every year from the advisory board and as co-chair to the Young Adult Task Force. And I also noticed that both graduations last year and this year were scheduled on BOC meeting days. Chair, if this position is too much for you and your busy schedule, leave. Every meeting you mention people having other things to do or places to be. At first it was disheartening and now it's just outright disgusting. 2 months ago, you were arrogant and came off as a bully in nature when you lied and referred to me on the record as a security threat. You showed a serious lack of emotional intelligence, and as I demanded that day that you hear from CHS, who was still in the room, and the public, after you allowed DOC to leave early because you didn't know how to do your job, that night someone died. From that day to the next hearing, 2 heartbeats died in DOC custody, and Mr. Carlton was left paralyzed. So who fights for the detained human rights? The June meeting, you mentioned that the board members on the Deaf Committee and no longer Mr. Bobby Cohen or Jackie Sherman, 2 of the longest standing members on that board, would be there. And you named board member Pitts as chair for the Deaf Committee. The most recent report was the 3rd report on the deafs in 2022, and it was issued 4/12/23. Where is the deafs for this report? Where's the reports for this? Mayday, Mayday to BOC. 6 heartbeats have stopped on your watch in 2023. At the June meeting, Chair, Pitts made a horrible statement alluding to the fact that if you heard one story of assault from the public, you tend to hear them all. I'm paraphrasing. Go look at the video. So, Chair of this BOC, I ask you, what faith do you have to hold the board member Pitts that she will be balanced and will do her due diligence to make sure that her bias towards the detained and their loved ones does not affect her reporting? Let me remind you all that no badge is above showing humanity and holding DOC accountable. No badge is above prioritizing and protecting the detained and preserving life. And lastly, I want to say to all clergy who are paying attention and have access to the island, you have a job to do and answer to your Lord first. You have a job to report every inhumane thing that you see and come across. Step up and do it. And I just want to tell y'all, if you need help, ask for it, because we are here to help you. It's not about pointing out names or pointing out faces or coming against you, trying to do something for the media. It's about saving lives. I begged you, Chair, to listen to CHS and myself, and a man died that night. I hope you can't sleep before you do right.
Okay, thank you. Lauren Stevens.
Good afternoon. I'm Lauren Stevens Davidowitz, and I am a staff attorney at the Prisoners' Rights Project of the Legal Aid Society. All of you know about our case Nunez. Last week's report from the court monitor was a scathing indictment of the DOE's ability to keep people in its custody safe, and it's impossible to summarize. But one of the many findings the monitor made was that the department cannot be trusted. The monitor questioned, quote, the overall veracity of reporting and commitment to transparency within the agency. Listening to the testimony of Commissioner Molina and his staff today really drove this home. On many occasions, I thought to myself, they must be describing a different jail. I'll focus on one issue that came up a lot today: education. The commissioner and his staff touted the department's educational programming and the number of people who've received GEDs and high school diplomas. I thought, again, they must be describing a different jail. Hanbury versus Thompson is a class action handled by my office concerning the Department of Corrections' provision of education to young people in DOC facilities. In 2016, the court in Hanbury issued an order with simple legal requirements. All people in custody who are eligible for school must receive at least 3 hours of school every school day. That placement in restrictive housing cannot change an individual's entitlement to school. And the DOC must provide escorts to ensure that students are taken to and from school in a timely manner. These requirements apply to anyone in DOC custody under age 21 when the school year begins, who does not have a high school diploma or GED and who wishes to enroll. Over the past several months, my colleagues and I have spoken to numerous class members who have described blatant violations of the court's order. We have heard repeatedly from people who are eligible for school and who have made clear over and over again to DOC staff that they wish to attend school, but they have not been enrolled, sometimes for over a year. Everyone we have spoken to in ESH, in other words, the restrictive housing, has said that they have not gone to school, and when they ask to go to school, they're told there's no school in ESH, excuse me. Class members also report missing days of school because escorts were late or never came, or because their unit was locked down. Not only is the DOC violating its legal obligations, but it's also violating the moral obligation by preventing young people who wish to better themselves while incarcerated from pursuing an education. The fact that the department highlights its ability to provide education to people in its custody as evidence of its competence should tell us all we need to know. This is a department with pervasive dysfunction, to quote the monitor. We ask that in this historic moment, the board robustly exercise its oversight duties with deep, unwavering skepticism of the department's statements and assurances, and that the board never lose sight of its critical role in protecting people in DOC custody and investigating wrongdoing. Thank you.
Solomon Acevedo. Is there Solomon?
Maybe he might be. Was here. He was here.
Okay, he's not here. Antoinette Anderson.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Antoinette Anderson. I'm the corresponding secretary of the COBA, which is the Correction Officers Benevolent Association. As I've sat here and listened to a lot of the testimonies, I understand them being upset about what goes on in Rikers Island, but I come here in a different light. Year to date, we have had 404 assaults on staff. We have had 23 sexual assaults, 12 on MOS, and 11 civilians. We have had 211 arsons. Since last month, we had 2 sexual assaults on female officers. When does it stop? BOC is supposed to protect everybody on Rikers Island, not just the PRCs. When is the protection coming for us, the officers? We are working 18-hour days every single day that we go to work. When is it going to stop? When are we going to be able to do our jobs, raise our families? When? When are we going to be able to go to the doctor to take care of us so that we can do our jobs properly? At the end of the day, we didn't commit a crime. We came here to do a job. We do not have the tools to do our job. As DOC and many people that came to this podium spoke about the cell doors, we are not safe just as well as the PRCs are not safe. So when is the BOC going to help us help them? We hear about services. We hear about, unfortunately, the PRCs dying. We're dying as well. We have officers die every month, unfortunately. When are we going to be helped? That's my bottom line. We don't go to work to be assaulted. We don't go to work to be, we had an officer yesterday that was assaulted, doing his job, closing cell doors, and he was sucker punched. When are we going to be protected? We come to work, we put on this uniform, and we try to keep everybody safe. We can't control all the environments, no matter how hard we try. I hear about services. Yes, it's an issue with services. We're working 18 hours. We're not going to get to work on time. We have 10 hours between tours. If you was up for 18 hours straight and you went to sleep, are you gonna be functioning the next 8 to 12 hours? So why is it expected for us to be able to function for another 18 hours straight? Without a meal, without a break. Some of us go to school. How are we gonna continue to go to school and educate ourselves? We can't. So your job is to help us as well, so that we can help those that are gonna be released into our communities again. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comments in the room today. And now we'll go to the online public comments. And we'll begin with Danielle Gerard.
For those providing public comment online, when you hear your name, please use the hand raise
Um,
feature on WebEx.
We can't hear.
Icon. Participants list. Once you raise your hand, you will be unmuted and able to turn on your camera. You will then be able to provide public comment for 3 minutes.
They said, hold on, so I think it's.
Thank you, board chairs and members of the Board of Correction. My name is Danielle Gerard. I'm a senior staff attorney at Children's Rights. We appear before you often. We advocate on behalf of young adults on Rikers. I don't have much to say today, except that I'm very disappointed in the agenda and the comments. We've had 6 people die this year in custody, 3 in the last couple of weeks. And there was really no mention of them at all or the circumstances that led to their deaths. And the reason for not disclosing these deaths are just extremely paltry. Regarding the young adults, I was horrified to hear the commissioner talk about how he is considering making permanent shackling to desks. The commissioner also mentioned closing Rikers Island as though that were something that the administration was on board with, which they are not. And in the meantime, there doesn't seem to be much of a plan anywhere for the population to be reduced to the number it needs to be in order to implement the borough jails. The data that was just presented regarding assaults on staff is alarming. It underscores that whatever the DOC management is doing is not working. COBA Secretary's beef is more properly with her union and the DOC, not the Board of Correction. And regarding the Board of Correction, I echo the views of the advocates and attorneys and their staff who spoke before me to say that we really count on your ability to oversee what's going on in the jails. And we would love to have you ask some targeted questions regarding this supposed plan to replace the groups like Fortune and Osborne with in-house staff. How many of the people, including the counselors and the uniformed staff that you're proposing to take over those duties, have ever offered to any incarcerated person the services that outside providers used to provide? What kind of training are they getting? How long is this going to take? Regarding every service that the outside providers used to provide, we'd love to know how that is actually going to happen on the ground and when it's going to start. And it would be great to have some data in this respect as well. How many incarcerated persons are even seeing counselors now before you take on more? And finally, with the level of violence and dysfunction that the monitor continues to find in every report, in addition to the lack of transparency the DOC has engaged in, how on earth are DOC uniformed personnel supposed to gain the trust of incarcerated persons to address returning to the community and providing other program? Thank you.
Thank you. Roger Clark.
Roger Clark, please raise your hand.
Is there a Roger Clark? Okay, no Roger Clark. Eileen Mir?
So,
It looks like you may be on, Eileen Mir. Hello? You can speak, Eileen.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you hear me?
Yes, hi.
Okay. You can hear me, right?
We can hear you, but not clear.
I'm sorry?
I can hear you, but not.
We can hear you, but not clear.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon. My name is Eileen Marr. I'm a civil rights union leader from Vocal, New York, a social worker and a survivor of Rikers Island, where I spent over 420 days. Last week, in the New York Daily News, I publicly called for Commissioner Molina to step down. That was after the DOC murder of Mr. Tavares, but before the murders of Mr. Howell and Mr. Johnstone. Since their deaths, I triple that sentiment. New York City DOC has more than proven that they are incapable of, well, doing anything right. I thank God above that I survived the island, and I thank God on my family and friends' behalf. We all know the excruciating pain when a loved one dies. Now multiply that by the thousands when you sit back and realize their deaths could and should have been prevented. These individuals who were murdered at heartbeats were someone's child, parent, spouse, friend, sibling. They matter. Their loved ones' grief and heartbreak matter and are important to someone and many other people. They are not less than human as DOC and the mayor choose to believe. The current powers that be have proven time and time again that they don't know what they are doing, nor do they care to learn and adapt. It is time to remove them from and extinguish their power to continue on this murder spree. Along with this, we have a moral and ethical obligation to decarcerate via a mass infusion of alternatives to incarceration, mental and physical health services, domestic violence services, education, library, community, and violence interruption programs. A mass release of those detained in accordance with the 8th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and finally, sooner rather than later, closing Rikers Island permanently. New York City DOC does not know what they are doing as far as maintaining a fair, safe, and healthy department goes. I was there, remember. The drug trafficking, violence, abuse, sexual violence, and medical neglect is perpetrated and maintained not by the detainees, it is by the officers. It's always the officers. So we need a new department, plain and simple. Look into the way Norway has jails and prisons operate. They are closing facilities, helping marginalized and improving lives and communities on a long-term basis. A couple weeks back, I spent time with a friend who's involved with the alternatives to using solitary confinement in Cook County, Illinois, and the Hands Off Assata movement. When I mentioned the New York City DOC's continued illegal use of solitary confinement, as well as their doubling down by the use of a medieval torture chair detainees are shackled to for days on end, she responded with, "It's predatory, lazy, and self-serving, as well as unnecessary. Ceasing from using solitary can only improve the environment and everyone's mental health. And let Let me note that Cook County DOC is no Mayberry. If they can make it work, there's no reason New York City can't. In conclusion, I ask you to do the right thing to save lives and improve lives and communities. Eliminate the care of the eliminate the core of the problem, a dilapidated DOC run by Mr. Molina and others who prefer torture over treatment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Michael McQuillan. Michael McQuillan. Okay, well, we don't have Michael McQuillan. I'm told that there's other people that signed up. By show of hand, is there anyone here that's in the room that signed up that didn't speak? Could you just give your name and come forward, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Diana Griffith, and I'm a legal advocate with the Prisoners' Rights Project at the Bronx Offenders. I visited a client the day after people in ESH were transferred to RMAC. The wait was unusually long, and I kept overhearing comments from correctional officers saying that nobody really knew what the new policies were for legal visits. To see my client, I was escorted to a RESH housing unit where I met my client in a former cell with plexiglass divider. The CO who escorted me stood right outside the door of my client's side of the cell, and my client became increasingly anxious about the CO being able to overhear a conversation. As a result, my client didn't feel comfortable discussing certain topics due to the lack of privacy. However, this client did report some concerning confinement conditions in the new ESH housing unit. After my client was moved to RESH, he didn't have a working toilet for over 24 hours, an issue that, according to my client, many other cells were also experiencing. He also said that the small window in his cell facing the outside was stuck shut, being unable to get any fresh air at all. The pain in my client's cell was still fresh when he was moved there. When I saw my client that day, he had streaks of fresh paint stuck to his arms and clothing from accidentally touching the walls in his cell. Normally, my office would have sent our client new clothes to replace the paint-stained shirts, but for months now, we've been unable to reliably send packages to your clients. Routinely, sneakers and other clothing items we mail out are not delivered to your client or are rejected by the facility without explanation. When the packages are rejected, they never return the packages to our office or offer a refund. Facilities, including specific housing units, also seem to have vastly different packaging rules. A client at NIC was told he couldn't receive our package containing a pair of approved sneakers per DOC regulations because people on the second and third tiers are not allowed to have sneakers. We have been unable to identify the existence of this policy in the DOC directive nor the minimum standards. We have contacted DOC Legal numerous times to get an explanation about why our packages are not being delivered or returned after filing grievances on behalf of our clients. Today, we have yet to receive an answer. The only response we have gotten from DOC Legal is to FOIL request documents regarding the grievances we filed to get a determination of the complaint. Our clients are also not informed about the resolution or ongoing investigation for any of the grievances they file on their own or we file on their behalf. One of our social workers recently followed through on the advice to FOIL request grievance documentation. The documents produced by DOC per our FOIL request essentially only contain the emails our social worker had sent to constituent services. The FOIL response revealed that OCGS had done nothing to investigate the matter, a pattern of inaction that all too often is DOC's response to grievances filed. To say that Rikers is not safe for anyone is an understatement. Yet another life was lost this past Saturday. Rikers is the land of the condemned where the city continues to send the most vulnerable and marginalized community members. The incarceration must be prioritized and receivership must happen. Both of the emergency brakes in the derailing freight train that is Rikers, and it's time we press hard on those brakes to try to save the thousands of lives of people on that island. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there's one last, okay, well, that is it. There, again, it is no formal meeting, so I won't adjourn. I'll just say that this session is ended. Thank you all.
I forget your name. Don't be offended. I had brain surgery. But I won't, yeah, and I won't forget your face.